I want to talk about the Azov Battalion and what their role is and how pivotal they are, if at all, in Ukraine. But first, who are they, and how did this come about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll preface by saying this is one of Putin's excuses for invading, is I got to go denazify this country,
Hmm.
and I'm not making the case that that is legitimate. I mean, yeah, there are Nazis in the country, but that doesn't mean you just launch a war,
Hmm.
you know. And they're probably the most dangerous Nazis in Europe or anywhere in the world as far as an organized armed force of Nazis. That much is true. But to me, it's sort of just like with the Al Qaeda guys in Syria. I'm not saying we should invade Syria to attack the Al Qaeda guys. I'm just saying, how in the world are we backing these Al Qaeda guys when that's who they are? And you can't tell me Assad is worse because he's not. You know, it's sort of the same thing here where I'm
Hmm.
not saying the government of Ukraine is a Nazi regime. And I'm not saying that Russia's invasion in the name of denazification is justified. But what I am saying is certainly there's enough of a presence of these guys inside the Ukrainian armed forces and inside their so-called civilian government, I guess their puppet government, um, that we sure as hell should not have anything to do with them whatsoever. And the consequences of arming them up now are surely going to be terrible. So that's all I'm saying as far as that. Because I know how, especially in this day and age, probably more than any other time in my life, anything you say people immediately race to try to jump to conclusion to say, "Oh, I get it. You're coming from this angle, and what you really
Hmm.
mean is this, because what you really want me to think is that, because you're taking the same position as this other guy." And it's this whole extrapolated thing out far beyond what you actually said. So I'm just trying to make myself clear here that I'm not saying Putin was right to justify it, and I'm not saying that it's a Nazi junta that rules Ukraine. If that was true, hell, it might be an excuse to invade. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not the case. But I am saying, boy, there are enough of these guys that we shouldn't have anything to do with intervening on their side. So now you ask me who they are. They're the proud grandsons of the Nazis from World War II, is who they are. And it's, essentially the major parties, the Svoboda Party and Right Sector and Azov, all are essentially, not even essentially, they are literally direct descendants of the groups that were the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, who were pro-German Nazi and who, their leadership and, their armed force fought on the side of the Nazis in Western Ukraine during World War II and participated in perpetrating the Holocaust against Jews and against Poles and Russian, ethnic Russians as well, but especially Jews and Poles there, killed tens of thousands of them. And, one of their major leaders at the time, the guy who was supposed to be the dictator of their state, if he had gotten his way, is a guy named Stepan Bandera. And you'll see, kind of posters and flags of him all the time among the Ukrainian nationalists. It was his men who had, committed absolute atrocities. Again, tens of thousands of Jewish and Polish civilians eradicated by them, operating under Nazi authority as what they called the Galatian SS, where Galatia is sort of this region in Western Ukraine. Um, and so uh, then in the Cold War, the CIA backed them and different factions of them. And I was actually just reading a thing yesterday about how they did not back Bandera's faction because they didn't think he commanded enough loyalty anymore. And they switched to his competitor, a guy named Lebed, who was a leader of a different faction of the OUN. Um, and I'm working on a book about this now, and I'll have all footnotes to death for you. And Buck, later if you want, I can send you an email full of links to crazy stuff to read if you want to look deeper into all this stuff. Um, the whole history behind this. But you know, in the Cold War, the CIA backed them. And in fact, there was a recent article in the LA Times that says, we've backed extreme right wing forces in Ukraine before and it didn't work out that well. Let's take a look at this history. And he quotes from a now declassified but previously secret CIA history of their own intervention and program there. in around the 1950s. And some of this intervention lasted throughout the Cold War. But just during this part of the secret war in the 1950s, they said, we were knowingly sending these men to their deaths. We knew they couldn't defeat the Soviet Union. What the hell were they going to do? All we were doing was we were using them to bleed Russia. And when we're going to do an operation like this, we're knowingly sending men to their deaths in this way. We got to think real carefully about what we're doing here. Even CIA guys got to have a conscience at some point. But of course, what they're talking about is sending a bunch of Nazis to their deaths fighting against the commies in this insurgency, which the KGB, pretty quickly rolled up. But that's who the CIA has a lot of sympathy for, God, geez, we're using and abusing these loyal Nazi cadres of ours.